Now, you, dear listener, may not be interested in the American trade war with China, but it sure as hell is interested in you. My first guest this morning then is Michael Sheridan, author of The Red Emperor, Xi Jinping, His New China. He served also as the Far East correspondent for the Sunday Times for no fewer than 20 years. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Matt.
How is China prepared for this trade war?
Seriously, deeply, methodically, and calmly. It's the opposite style to what we've seen from the White House. And it speaks to the style difference between the two leaders. President Xi Jinping, who is also head of the party and head of the army, has barely spoken in public. He certainly doesn't go on social media, and he doesn't write things in capital letters. So the Chinese have played this very calmly and coolly. They have prepared a long time. They have a suite of responses. They have a toolbox to reach into, and they have already hit back with their own tariffs, measures to curb the export of rare earths, and other sanctions against American companies. So they are playing this seriously.
And they're playing it seriously, and they're playing it in a much more prepared way because, of course, they were already hit by sanctions, first by the Trump administration in 2016, and then, of course, Biden continued many of those tariffs.
Well, it is worth remembering that this is a bipartisan approach in the United States. Both Republicans and Democrats agree that China is the competitor and the challenge. So there's agreement on that. And the Chinese know that it's serious, no matter who's in office. But what I would say is that they have had time to prepare. The Biden period was one of continuity. And under the new Trump administration, they may have absorbed a few shocks already because these numbers are prohibitive, but they are certainly not going to back down. It would be politically unthinkable. They may well compromise and make deals along the way, but Xi Jinping is a red emperor. He is not going to pick up the phone and call the real estate mogul in Washington. So there is a real mismatch here. And I suspect the cooler heads in Washington and indeed Beijing are hoping they find a way to climb down on both sides and just get talking at some point.
Well, there were hints in that direction, but only very, very small hints yesterday from Donald Trump. But of course, as I said earlier, we never know with these hints whether they actually become something slightly more substantial. Just tell us about the imbalances of trade, because the kind of orthodox calculation in Washington is that the Chinese, sell us much more stuff than we sell them. Therefore, they will suffer more in a trade war. But that's not strictly speaking true, is it?
Let's bear in mind the biggest cliche, which is that China is very, very, very big. Its GDP is enormous, and exports to the United States represent only about 15% of all its exports everywhere. So there's 85% of the Chinese export market that is not the United States. They have already reduced their dependence. They've diversified. Xi Jinping, even this week, was striding around like an emperor, visiting Vietnam and other countries in Southeast Asia. And he is spreading his wings over these countries who are looking for friends, who don't want to be punished by their allies. There's a great deal of uncertainty about the United States. And do remember, China is going to be there, and he will be poised to swoop and take any advantage, economic or political, that he can. So this is a stupid game from the American strategic point of view. And the Chinese have very smartly stepped into their place. Now, I'm not saying that the Chinese have the answers. I mean, nobody is queuing up to copy the Chinese political model. There are not hordes of immigrants bashing on the doors of China for its wonderful opportunities. So the Chinese offer is not actually that good. But if it's better than the American offer and the Western liberal trade order, countries will take it.
One of the misconceptions that was underpinned by what J.D. Vance had to say about Chinese peasants the other day, is this sort of idea that they're very, they can make Barbie dolls, and they can screw things together, but basically they're not innovating. They're not coming up with the ideas. That is still America's remit. Again, that is fundamentally wrong, isn't it? Especially when you look at things like electric vehicles.
Oh, look, they've gone ahead of that rural agricultural-based economy for a long time. By the way, J.D. Vance, among the other things he gets wrong, is that the word peasant is not a pejorative in China. Chairman Mao exalted the peasants along with the workers.
But perhaps he was paying them a compliment. We never know.
He was. And in fact, the Chinese official who's in charge of Hong Kong more or less, has just said, well, the American peasants can now bow down to China because we are a proud nation and we're not giving in. But let's be serious for a second. China is going ahead so fast with artificial intelligence, new generations of chips, all the plans and projects for a new 21st century economy. I've read and studied Xi Jinping's latest statements and speeches. They're out there ad nauseam. All he talks about is new technology, new industry, conquering different new opportunities, taking China to a different stage, electric vehicles, artificial intelligence, the Chinese machine learning, artificial intelligence tool that has come up and surprised everybody. That's what they're focusing on. And they gave Western journalists a tour recently of a Huawei plant in eastern China that is like a technology campus that any Silicon Valley king would die for. They are charging ahead. They talk about the 21st century economy, the new economy. They are not talking about tariffs and borders and migration and sovereignty. These are to them, these are 19th century power concepts. Xi Jinping is interested in ruling the 21st century, not fighting the battles of the 19th. And that is the single big advantage that China has.
One of our colleagues described the new electric vehicles being made by Huawei, which is it's a mobile phone company, as mobile phones on wheels essentially. Their cars, their self-driving cars, and their electric vehicles are so interconnected with the rest of our digital ecosphere. It is quite astonishing, and we'll leave that to one side. I mean, what you've just said is kind of what I've suspected for a long time: is that Donald Trump is fighting over jobs that went, kind of out of fashion in the middle of the last century, while that lot are preparing for this century. And I don't see America having a plan that deals with all the repercussions of this trade war, whether it's supply chains, where they get their rare earth metals from, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, look, J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy, which is, by the way, a formidable piece of
it's wonderful. Yeah,
it's an excellent book, but it's about nostalgia. It's about evoking a past in America that has gone. And I don't know any serious global economist who thinks that hard metal bashing manufacturing is going to come back to Pennsylvania and Virginia from southern China. It's not going to happen. So the Chinese took advantage of the first wave of globalization from the late 80s onwards. They have regrouped, and they are poised to take advantage of the next stage of globalization. And that's exactly the kind of marketing that is going to demand high technology, electric vehicles, interconnectedness, all the things they are perfecting in China, not just for consumer confidence, but in order to control the population. So it's becoming digitally seamless in China, how people can live their lives but be governed at the same time and watched every step of the way. So there's political dangers here as well as economic ones.
Indeed. And I think, ask me which society I'd rather live in, a chaotic America run by, mad Donald Trump, or, a much less chaotic police state run by Xi Jinping. I know which one I'd choose. But there are weaknesses in China as well, aren't there? There is a property bubble, there's a debt crisis. Tell us about how much those weaknesses could derail, the current project of China in the middle of this trade war.
Well, I have to say, I think I still would opt to live in America rather than Xi Jinping.
That's what I meant.
I saw quite enough of Xi Jinping's China. And remember, they have used technology to make the people the servants of the government, not the other way around. What could go wrong? Their big things have been investment and property. There's a large rural population in China. Many people wanted to go to the cities, own flats, have a home, go up the ladder of progress as their parents did. There's a property bubble. Prices have gone down in many areas. Things are stuck. There's over leveraging. There's corruption on all sides. But I remember two things. One, the Chinese economy is so big that it can withstand most of these pressures domestically. And two, the government pulls the levers. Xi Jinping can do things that Donald Trump can only dream of. He can order the banks to issue loans. He can compel brokers to buy shares. The government can even set the price in the market if it so demands. And so you need to recall, and we've had this debate in Britain just this week over steel and other things, the Chinese state controlled the economy. Even if it doesn't run a company on paper, it does in practice if it wants to. The law compels entrepreneurs and businesses to submit to whatever the state wants. So they have many, many levers, and they have deep reserves. They are confident, rightly or wrongly, they are very confident that they can withstand this.
Finally and briefly, no one wins in a trade war. Protectionism is bad for everyone, but some people might, or some nations might win a little bit more than others. In this standoff between China and the US, who are you putting your money on?
Long run, I'm putting my money on China because its economy is so diversified. It deals with, more than 100 countries as key export markets. Its products are unbeatable because the supply chain and the logistics and the resources are there in a way that simply can't be replicated in the United States today. The trade war is an outdated concept, and what Trump should be doing is getting on with competing on the real frontiers of the next century, which are the ones we've talked about.
Michael Sheridan, author of The Red Emperor, Xi Jinping and his New China. Thank you very much indeed.